Today on the official Marvel podcast, we return to the multiversal adventures of Marvel Animation's What If. We'll reflect on the show's development with Marvel Studios' head of television, streaming, and animation, Brad Winderbaum, executive producer, showrunner, head writer, AC Bradley, and more.
What's the weirdest, coolest, most different thing that you'll never see in the movies that we can do in an episode? But at the same time, how do we stay true to the characters?
We're also taking a deeper look at the star of the series, The Watcher, with an exploration of the comic book history of the character. I'm Victoria Ying.
I'm Raylo.
And this is the official Marvel podcast.
Victoria, I have a very important question for you.
Hit me, sis.
Some might even call it the question. Have you ever pondered the question, what if?
Time. Space. Reality. It's more than a linear path. It's a prism of endless possibility, where a single choice can branch out into infinite realities, creating alternate worlds from the ones you know. I am the Watcher. I am your guide through these vast new realities. Follow me and ponder the question, what if?
Marvel Animation's What If is an animated series featuring all of your favorite Marvel characters with a twist. As star Jeffrey Wright puts it,
What If is an exploration of alternate realities for many of the familiar characters that Marvel fans know and love. Alternative storylines and a few unexpected twists and turns.
running for 3 exhilarating seasons, the series is largely an anthology with most episodes tackling a different question, like what if T'Challa becomes a Star-Lord, or what if Ultron won? But The Watcher guides us through it all, holding our hand as we explore different paths the Marvel Cinematic Universe might have taken if just one thing had been different. Some of these paths are inspiring.
The name's Captain Carter.
But other paths are frightening. While a multiverse with infinite possibilities is certainly fun, it's even better with a guide. Ours is The Watcher, played by Emmy Award-winning actor Jeffrey Wright.
And The Watcher kind of serves as a type of Rod Serling to the Twilight Zone, narrating the events, but also a sometimes passive, sometimes not participant. The Watcher is an extraterrestrial being who has the capacity to see all things. He's like probably the biggest TikTok, Instagram news junkie in all the known universes. Your busiest neighbor, the nosiest neighbor in the universe.
The character of The Watcher made his first comic book appearance in April of 1963 as part of Fantastic Four issue number 13. Created by the legendary Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, he belongs to a larger group of extraterrestrial beings who observe the goings-on of other species. The Watcher's assignment? To keep an eye on our little corner of the universe. The Watcher is at the core of What If, but of course, The Watcher isn't the only notable character in the series. What If also introduces variants of a number of popular characters to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Here's Marvel Studios' head of television, streaming, and animation, Brad Winderbaum, to explain.
When Disney Plus came to us and wanted shows for us to produce, the first thing we said was it needs to have the heart, it needs to have the soul that our films do. It needs to ultimately be about character. And in the what if side of the universe, we are going to take the characters we know and are familiar with from the films and manipulate and adapt them and surprise people with how those characters would change if one event was just a little bit different.
Sure enough, each episode of What If tackles a scenario in which one small change leads to huge consequences. The very first episode asks, what if Captain Carter were the first Avenger? In this universe, Steve Rogers is incapacitated just before he's supposed to take the super soldier serum. Desperate for the serum not to go to waste, Peggy Carter takes the serum in his place, thus creating not just a super soldier, but a female super soldier, Captain Carter.
The Allies must be desperate, sending in a fragile Fraulein to fight for them.
Fragile.
Another standout character variant is out of this world, literally. Season 2, Episode 4 asks the question, what if Iron Man crashed into the Grandmaster? In this version of Tony Stark's story, he still flies a missile into space to help the Avengers win the Battle of New York. But afterwards, he doesn't fall back to Earth. Instead, he gets sucked through a wormhole to the Grandmaster's planet, Sakaar. When the Grandmaster forces Tony to watch a barbaric, high-tech chariot race to the death, Tony intervenes and comes face to face with the race's violent victor, the daughter of Thanos herself, Gamora. Soon, Tony and the Grandmaster face off in their very own deadly chariot race, but the Grandmaster doesn't exactly play fair. The only way for Tony to beat him is by appealing to Gamora's compassion.
You get to decide who you want to be, not your father, not your past. You decide. Who are you?
Gamora realizes in that moment that she's more than the icy cold murderess Thanos has raised her to be. Together, Tony and Gamora defeat the Grandmaster, then they go ahead and defeat Thanos too while they're at it. It's amazing how different the lives of everyone in the MCU would have looked if Iron Man had simply found his way to Sakaar. Of course, Tony Stark isn't the only character whose life would have done a 180 thanks to a field trip to outer space. Another very special character in the What If series is that of T'Challa as Star-Lord. The late, great Chadwick Boseman was able to record all of T'Challa's Season 1 dialogue before his tragic death. It was his last appearance as the character and a bittersweet send-off for the King of Wakanda.
And it was special for me to get to hear him voice T'Challa once again and to be a part of that. It's pretty nice. And I think, obviously, Black Panther, T'Challa, there's a mysticism about that film and about that story that captured all of our attention. And there is now a greater mysticism about Chadwick's life that overlaps with the heroicism of that character that he played in a really very special way. So we capture a bit of that in his episode of What If.
The first What If comic book debuted way back in 1977, and the series has been a favorite of comic fans ever since. So when Marvel decided to adapt the concept to the screen, the head of visual development for Marvel Studios, Ryan Meinerding, was understandably excited.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up reading a lot of different comics, and What If were always some of my favorites. There was the chance to explore your favorite characters in entirely new situations and seeing characters transformed in ways that you hadn't expected and understanding them from new and in entirely different ways. I think the chance to do it with the MCU characters is really an amazing opportunity because it's taking characters and storylines that have existed for the past 10 years and finding ways of twisting and turning them to turn the visuals for the characters as well as like the actual personalities and into things that you hadn't expected.
What was expected is how incredible Ryan Meinerding's work looks in What If. As Winderbaum can confirm, Ryan is a legend at Marvel Studios. He's been crafting the looks of your favorite superheroes, dating all the way back to Marvel Studios' Iron Man.
Working with Ryan Meinerding is always a privilege. He's responsible for designing the bulk of our superheroes in the MCU, starting with the Mark I armor on to today, and allowing him the freedom to dive back into our legacy of characters, most of which he's designed, and now manipulate and play and stretch what those people are capable of, gives birth to amazing concepts. So we've gone to Ryan with ideas like, all right, Skinny Steve doesn't end up becoming a super soldier, but Howard Stark builds for him a suit of armor called the Nazi Stomper. What does that look like? And he comes back with one of the coolest Iron Man armors I've ever seen. Or what if Peggy Carter became a super soldier? And all of a sudden, he produces an illustration of Captain Carter that's got all the strength and nobility that we know from Peggy's inherent character, but now it's physical. We know that it's more than skin deep, but certainly her powerful stature also expresses that. One of my personal favorites is what if T'Challa became Star-Lord? So in this what if timeline, T'Challa was kidnapped by the Ravagers instead of Peter Quill, and he becomes a space pirate. But his influence changes the pirates as well, and all of a sudden they're polished and more noble than we are used to seeing them in Guardians of the Galaxy. However, when you look at the design of T'Challa as Star-Lord, he still has the nobility of a king, even though his destiny was significantly changed.
Of course, the show couldn't exist without executive producer, showrunner, and head writer A.C. Bradley.
I absolutely adore Marvel. I love comic books. So this is my dream job.
I was super excited when I was brought into the room and they lock the door and everything is covered. There's sheets on the walls because they can't tell you what they're working on. And Brad Winderbaum sat across from me and he went, "We want to create an animated series. I hear you know how to do that," because that was my background. And I was just like, who's the character? And instead he went, "We want to do What If. Have you ever heard of What If?" And I love Marvel. I've loved comic books since my high school years. And the What If series is just so much fun. It's seeing your characters in ways that you know you'll never get to see them again and just running with it. And I was like, okay, this is how you make an animated series. And please, please tell me there's going to be a part 2 of this conversation where you ask me to join. And I'm not just here for advice.
A.C. Bradley speaks further on how the series came together.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the way we started all of this was we sat around the table, literally this table, and we have the Marvel Cinematic Universe at our disposal. Basically, every episode has to take a question from the Marvel Universe and spin out and see where it goes. It's kind of almost like it's 2 strands. We're always trying what's the weirdest, coolest, most different thing that you'll never see in the movies that we can do in an episode? But at the same time, how do we stay true to the characters? If Tony Stark falls through a wormhole and ends up on Sakaar, he's still going to be Tony Stark. What does that mean? Well, of course, it means he wants to get back to Pepper. So what's that journey for him? If Steve Rogers doesn't step into the cradle, if he does not become Captain America, if he doesn't become the world's first super soldier, he's still going to be Steve Rogers, which means he's still going to try to save the world, to do what's right when everyone tells him to stand down. He's going to rush into battle. So what does it look like to have a smaller Steve Rogers in the middle of World War II? That's kind of been our goal, is to take these kind of fun, outlandish ideas, but still stick true to the characters and the humanity and having fun with it.
Of course, being part of such a complex, ever-changing cinematic universe can come with its own unique challenges.
We get to play in the Marvel sandbox so much. It's so enjoyable. The one pitfall has been running smack first into movies already in development. Apparently, I pitched part of Avengers 4. Hey, it's awesome. Hopefully great minds think alike there. So that's been a lot of fun. It's just basically not hitting on something they've already done, but then also finding new ways to tell different stories.
What if accidentally spoiled Marvel Studios' Avengers Endgame? With changes to avoid those potential spoilers, though, What If premiered on Disney Plus in 2021. You heard that right, 2021. That means the first season was in production in, you guessed it, the dreaded 2020. While most of us navigated the pandemic by hunkering down to bake sourdough bread, Marvel decided to cook up something else entirely. Jeffrey Wright speaks on how the unique timing of production affected making the show.
And we actually did some of this stuff during the pandemic. We recorded a fair amount. So I would get stuff emailed to me and look at it, and then we would coordinate, and then we would set up a time to record. And, I'd be looking at this stuff in my closet. I was in my closet with a, recording setup, just rolling like that. It was an interesting process at times. It was very different than what you might expect, but we all just shared what we were going to bring to the table and bounced off one another. And I think the character evolved somewhat as we did that, and here we are. So it wasn't an ordinary thing.
Another way What If is extraordinary, the fact that it is the very first animated project in the MCU.
When you think about a show like What If, you think about infinite possibilities, infinite potential. You need a medium that is going to allow you to go down any road you want and won't be limited by budgetary constraints or logistics at all. Animation is a great format for What If because it would cost the same amount of money basically to tell a story that takes place on Earth or a story that takes place in space, or CG characters and human characters will cost the same, which is very different from working in live action. But if we're going to go into the world of animation, we need to make sure that it's something that is different, something that doesn't look like other things on television, perhaps, or feels like it's using the tools in a unique way. And for that, we turn to the talented Brian Andrews, who has directed some of the coolest looking animation on television in the last 15 years. Brian's created some of our most memorable sequences, and he is bringing to the project a very unexpected look. We'll be chasing a 2D style instead of a 3D style of animation. And we are looking at artists like J.C. Leyendecker, Mead Schaefer, people who really drew with an eye towards character and an eye towards color and lit their worlds in a way as illustrators that felt very atmospheric. So there was a lot of light spread and a lot of flair and a lot of characters who were taking on the attributes of the lights they were in, which is really exciting.
Clearly, Winderbaum was passionate about making What If as an animated show, and rightfully so. The animation brings so much to the series, allowing the storytelling to bridge the gap between comic books and live action. Fellow executive producer and supervising director Brian Andrews speaks further about Winderbaum's passion for making What If as an animated show.
Right. So, to answer the question of like why animated and where that even came from, Brad's always been just a huge fan of animation. Like, I think he started training to be like an artist back in college, like in New York, and he was going to go into he was going to be Banksy or something, you know? And somehow that kind of switched out, and eventually they came over here and he was like making movies and stuff. But that knowledge of art, that love of art, and also that love of animation like never left. And so either he completely was like, you know, when the streaming thing was going to happen, they were going to be doing a variety of shows. He's kind of like, hey, how about an animated show? He may have been the one to suggest it. I could be wrong, but I get the impression that may have been the thing. And doing the whole What If, and I think it lends itself to animation in the sense that it can immediately stand apart from the movies, but yet it still exists in the same universe. And because the comics What If told stories you didn't see in the initial run, this is a way where we can also explore stories that you may not see shot live action. But yet, if the multiverse is infinite, then any number of these stories do happen and have happened. And this is a way we can illustrate them in a more artistic way. And then that answers to how we decided as to what style to pursue. And those conversations is every episode a completely different animated style or not? And so there was all the questions we kind of had, and we kind of settled on, no, let's have it be one consistent style. It's just that the stories are different because the multiverse mirrors itself. So we didn't want every universe to be so drawn differently. Here's our language, here's our style, this is our animated version of the MCU. And have that be consistent throughout all the storytelling. So, because that's what they would do if they were doing this live action. You know, they wouldn't redesign Tom Hiddleston's face. It would be Tom Hiddleston as Loki, whether Loki's a hero or Loki's a villain or Loki's has zero power. You know, whatever their choice would be, they wouldn't change the physical structure of the guy. So why would we change that? So we'll just let animation. Then we can pursue things like color, lighting. We can let animation allow us to play in those veins, like make that, all those other aspects really, really rich within a consistent style and keep it from episode to episode. It's just the nature of the episodes will dictate whether or not we dial up the shadows or dial them down. If it's a comedic episode, it's like, maybe it's a little bit, it's lighter, cheerier. If it's a horror episode, then maybe it's darker and scarier.
AC Bradley similarly comes from a background in animation, but she wanted to do something unique with What If.
We're looking to push the visuals to the max, to do things that's never actually been done in animation, specifically 2D animation. We want it to feel cinematic, lush, almost like an illustration style to it, where you feel that you're still in the MCU, but you're also seeing a different side of it.
Beyond being the first animated property in the MCU, What If was also one of Marvel Animation's first shows as they began developing content for Disney+, and it played a big part in showing just how good MCU shows can be.
For a while in history, there's been like the two camps. It's like there's movies, there's TV. And TV is done back in the day, obviously. It's faster, it's cheaper, and there's advertisers that you have to pay lip service to and the rest. So that dictated to a certain degree what was capable on television. But years go by and the audience gets more and more savvy, and you get filmmakers that are starting to go back into TV, and they're bringing a cinematic sensibility back to TV. And we're in this age now of prestige television. The streaming is part of it, but even network shows are trying to spend a little bit more time to make something and spend a little bit more money to make it feel cinematic because they want to compete. But the streaming stuff, they just said, let's just make it rad because we don't have to answer to these individuals. We can just do it, and they're making. So I would say that in a way, cinematic storytelling is becoming a thing where you don't have to just go to a movie to see cinematic storytelling. We're actually seeing it on the streaming screen or the small screen. And there's so many shows out now that are just borrowing the cinematic language and just going there. So they are, even though they're quote unquote episodes of a show, they feel like, in a way, many movies when they do it right. And for What If, that's something that I say all the time. It's like it's not TV, and even though it's episodes, they're actually it's a mini movie, because for me it's cinematic storytelling. So just the fact that here's the way it's being presented to you in like 30-minute chunks on the streaming service, that doesn't mean it's any less of a cinematic event than watching Avengers Endgame or something. The idea is that you try your best to make it as interesting, as compelling, as visually beautiful, that it's all there. And I think more and more services across the board are trying to do that because I think the audience wants it. I mean, even myself as an audience member, I want that. So I want to see that made, but I'm also in a position where I can help get it made.
AC Bradley agrees.
At the end of the day, we want people to watch an episode and feel like they've just watched a miniature Marvel movie. It had all the spectacular action and the jokes and the humor, but most importantly, it had the heart.
Well, I can confirm that I certainly feel like I watched a miniature Marvel movie with each episode of What If, and I'd wager audiences agreed. The first season was the most in-demand new series to debut in the US at the time of its release. For several years, it even held the distinction of being Disney Plus's biggest animated series premiere of all time. The series was nominated for numerous awards and won both a Critics' Choice Television Award for Best Animated Series and an Emmy Award for Chadwick Boseman's outstanding character voiceover performance as T'Challa. Despite the fact that What If dealt with matters of the multiverse outside of the main storylines of the MCU, it has also inspired changes in the MCU's home universe of Earth 616. For example, Captain Carter went on to make her live-action debut in Marvel Studios' Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. And What If's zombie episode led to the recent spin-off series Marvel Zombies. No matter what corner of the multiverse you call your home, though, you can revisit The Watcher and the rest of the cool, chaotic multiverse variants of your favorite characters by streaming all 3 seasons of What If, only on Disney+.
Watch out, listeners. Today, we're taking a good hard look at a character who looks back at us. We're discussing The Watcher.
It's about time I got some recognition for all the hard work I do.
What are you talking about?
One of this episode's big topics is The Watcher. Well, that's me. I subscribe to Disney Plus, and I watch every single Marvel movie. I watch every TV series. I watch every behind-the-scenes featurette. I mean, who am I if not The Watcher?
No, we're actually talking about the Marvel Comics character, The Watcher.
Okay, well, I also know who that is, right? He's the villain who wears timepieces on his wrists, and each one turns into some kind of deadly gadget that he uses to...
I'm going to stop you there.
Because it's a brilliant idea for a villain, and you're jealous I came up with it?
Not even close. We're talking about Uatu, the Watcher. Even though he is arguably one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy, Uatu rarely uses his powers to participate in conflicts. As the title implies, his main duty is to observe and record events throughout the multiverse as they happen. In fact, Uatu has taken an oath to never interfere in the affairs of the civilizations he observes.
Uatu comes from a race of immortal cosmic beings with notably large heads who possess the ability to shape the universe and bend reality to their will. They also possess the restraint to avoid doing so. These all-powerful beings can fly, teleport, generate force fields, and even travel through time. It's even said that a Watcher can die by choosing to, and they could come back to life by simply choosing not to be dead anymore.
You might think that with all those powers, the Watchers would be more active in protecting the universe from threats, and you would be sorta right. After all, they didn't always have a non-interference policy.
So what were they called before they started strictly watching things? The Existers?
the Luminous. As one of the first sentient races in the galaxy, the Luminous realized they were more technologically advanced than most of their neighboring planets. They decided that they should provide aid to the more primitive races. Uatu's father, Ikor, was one of the 4 Watchers who visited a planet called Basilicus and gave them knowledge of atomic energy.
The Luminous promised that they would be able to improve life by heating their cities at a very small expense and even help them conquer disease. But Ikor's actions had unforeseen and disastrous consequences for the inhabitants of Basilicus.
The Basilicans used this incredible new power to create weapons. They ended up destroying themselves along with 90% of the universe in a genocidal war. This was a pivotal lesson for the beings formerly known as the Luminous. They decided then and there to become the Watchers and to never again interfere in the affairs of another alien world.
The Watchers assigned themselves to the moons of several inhabited planets in order to observe and report from close by. Uatu was assigned to Earth's moon, and over time, he developed a fondness for our scrappy little planet. That fondness would lead him to break his vow many, many, many times over the years.
It's actually kind of a running gag that Uatu, the Watcher, does a lot more than just watching, to the point where one of his allies has jokingly referred to him as Uatu the Doer.
Uatu's first appearance in comics showed him breaking his vow. Issue number 13 of the Fantastic Four, published in 1963, sees Marvel's first family working hard to win the space race against communist Russia. Reed Richards discovered a meteor that fell from space and used it to create a new type of rocket fuel powerful enough to reach the surface of the moon. He had determined that the meteor came from the mysterious blue area of the moon and wanted to explore in order to discover what other strange wonders this place might hold.
Meanwhile, a Russian scientist named Ivan Kragov, aka the supervillain known as Red Ghost, had simultaneously been working on launching himself into space. His motivations were a little different from those of the Fantastic Four. Kragov was jealous of their abilities, so he did what anyone would do in that situation. He trained 3 apes to operate a spaceship and deliberately exposed himself and the apes to cosmic rays in an attempt to get similar superpowers.
The Red Ghost plan worked, and he found himself and his team of super apes squaring off against Reed and his fantastic family on the moon. The battle between these superheroes and villains in the pages of Marvel Comics was an obvious parallel to the real-life space race happening at the same time in the 1960s between the US and Russia.
This conflict disturbed Uatu, who had been living in a long-dead city in the blue area of the moon, probably because it reminds him of the events that shaped the people from the Luminous to the Watchers.
Uatu declared that he would tolerate no large-scale war on the moon and transported the Fantastic Four, as well as Red Ghost and his team of super apes, to an area of the dead city so they could duke it out. Once the Fantastic Four were declared the winners, Uatu clarified that the Watchers must always be distant and aloof.
Sure, unless it's one of the other 336 times that Uatu feels like he needs to intervene. On one occasion, the Watcher observed a planet where 2 warring alien tribes were fighting over the beautiful Queen Calthea. Uatu fell in love with Queen Calthea, and when her life was threatened, Uatu revealed himself once again to save her.
Uatu has also been known to use the big brain inside his very big head and manipulate the terms of his vow in clever ways. At one point, he encountered an alien named Zaku, the Sun Stealer. You'll never guess what this guy's ultimate goal was.
Training apes to operate a spaceship and then exposing them to cosmic rays?
Close, but not quite. Zaku planned to steal the sun from Earth's solar system, and he had heard that a powerful Watcher was nearby. Zaku visited Uatu on the moon to gain confirmation that the Watcher's vow would prevent him from interfering with the plan. Uatu confirmed this, but kept Zaku distracted by asking more and more questions about his schemes. And eventually, the alien's ship sank into some type of lunar bog. Zaku was now stranded on the moon and begged for help, but Uatu reminded the Sun Stealer that his vow prevents him from interfering.
Uatu's creative interpretation of his vow often comes in the form of warning other superpowered heroes about the impending cosmic threats and letting them deal with it. When he found out Galactus was coming to consume Earth, not only did he warn the Fantastic Four, but he even showed the Human Torch where to find a weapon powerful enough to stop the Devourer of Worlds.
So the Watchers observe and record everything that happens, but where do they store all that information? I mean, is there a big library somewhere on the Watcher planet with history books covering the entire universe?
The in-universe answer to that question is wild. In the 2014 crossover event Original Sin, a coalition of villains that includes a guy with an eyeball for a head who calls himself the Orb attacked Uatu's citadel in the blue area of the moon. They incapacitated the Watcher and stole one of his eyes.
I remember this. Nick Fury showed up to investigate the theft and found out the eye is where Watchers save their recordings. Fury feared the devastation these villains could unleash with the vast amount of knowledge contained in just Uatu's eye. So, of course, he killed Uatu and then took his other eye. And they say you should never meet your heroes.
Maybe we should update that phrase to, you should never kill your heroes and then steal their magical eyeball.
I think it needs that disclaimer next to it, yes. Well, Fury was tried for his actions by the Council of Watchers. They punished him accordingly by saddling him with Uatu's solemn duty. They transferred the remnants of Uatu's power to Fury and appointed him as Earth's Watcher, forever confined to the moon.
Forever didn't last too long, though, because as we said earlier, a Watcher is powerful enough to will themselves back to life after they die.
During a recent major Marvel event known as the Reckoning War, Uatu did just that. Remember the Priscilicans we mentioned earlier?
The people that were gifted atomic power by the Watchers and then they used it to destroy themselves?
Right, those guys. Well, it turns out a few of them survived annihilation and they formed themselves into an army called the Reckoning. Their goal was to get revenge on the Watchers by supplying Watcher technology to hostile alien empires.
The Reckoning became a big enough problem that the Fantastic Four, the Guardians of the Galaxy, and Ego, the Living Planet, all had to team up to oppose them. Even the Fantastic Four's arch nemesis, Dr. Doom, joined the fight against the Reckoning.
Notably absent from this coalition, however, were the Watchers themselves. Even when the Reckoning threatened to destroy the Watchers' home planet T-37X, the only one willing to step in was Uatu himself.
Uatu discovered that one of his people, a fellow Watcher named Emnu, had been responsible for most of the annihilation brought on by the First War. In response to the Priscilicans creating weapons and spreading destruction, Emnu had created a powerful weapon called the Ultimate Nullifier, which he used to destroy them, along with most of the known universe at the time.
The Reckoning sought to wield the Ultimate Nullifier, and they thought the key to controlling it was the apex of all realities.
The apex of all reality sounds like a really big cosmic highway intersection.
Sort of. If that highway intersection had off-ramps leading to every location, everywhere that has ever existed or will exist in the future. In Uatu's own words, it is the gateway to every possibility and what-if world you could imagine. In fact, it turns out planet T-37X was built by the Watchers long ago when they first discovered the apex. The planet surrounds it, protecting it from anyone power hungry enough to try and use it to their advantage, which could be me in this case.
Uatu realized that the Reckoning was a dangerous force that would do just that, and they must be stopped. Uatu intervened once again, this time absorbing the apex while the rest of his people were evacuated off the planet. As a result, all the other Watchers lost their power of cosmic sight, making Uatu the one and only Watcher.
Using his incredible power, Uatu decided that his next action would not count as intervention, but rather rectification. He restored the area of the universe that was destroyed by Emnu's Ultimate Nullifier and created a canvas of infinite possibilities in which 8 quadrillion new worlds were born.
I'm sorry, did you say quadrillion?
Correct. I did. And while you're trying to wrap your mind around that astronomical figure, I have one last question. Now, if the Watchers watch everything, well, then who watches the Watchers?
Well, that could be you. At least you could be the reader and check out more of Uatu's adventures in the pages of Marvel Comics.
That's right, listeners. There are almost 50 years of What If comics available where you can enjoy the big bald-headed Uatu sharing fantastical tales where things could have gone slightly or, in some cases, spectacularly different. For example, in issue 49 from 1992, we learned, what if Silver Surfer possessed the Infinity Gauntlet?
Personally, I'm a big fan of What If number 14 from 1979. What if Sergeant Fury and his Howling Commandos had fought World War II in outer space? Ooh, or 24 from 1991, what if Wolverine had become the Lord of the Vampires?
We hope you enjoyed this peek at every optometrist's favorite Marvel character.
But Ray, don't you realize we're constantly living under the surveillance of a different entity? But instead of using sight, they're depending on their hearing.
I'm very afraid to ask you to explain that.
Out there, on the other side of the speakers and our headphones, they listen to every single episode of the official Marvel podcast. They know all about us, but we know nothing about them. Who are they if not the listener?
Oh, boy. Well, then, thanks for listening, listeners.
Valentine's Day isn't the only day on the calendar we're celebrating this week. We're also coming up on a very special anniversary for Marvel's own Merc with a Mouth. Deadpool, starring Ryan Reynolds, was released in theaters on February 12, 2016. That's 10 years ago tomorrow. The film blew all expectations out of the water, bringing in $797 million globally. It was nominated for Golden Globes, Critics' Choice Awards, and many, many others. When it was released, it became the highest-grossing R-rated film of all time. It was so beloved by fans that it inspired a sequel, Deadpool 2, which was released in 2018. Then, in 2024, Wade Wilson made the jump to the MCU with Marvel Studios' Deadpool and Wolverine, the current highest-grossing R-rated film of all time.
I don't know how to thank you, but I do know how to hug you.
Here's to 10 years of chimichangas, katanas, and maximum effort. Happy anniversary, Deadpool! Deadpool, Deadpool 2, and Marvel Studios' Deadpool and Wolverine are all available to stream on Disney+.
Next week on the official Marvel podcast, we're joined by Marvel Comics VP and Executive Editor Tom Brevoort and Uncanny X-Men writer Gail Simone for the preview of the next chapter in the mutant saga, Shadows of Tomorrow.
We all feel that it's time to do some real world building again for the larger mutant story. And we're talking all the time, and everyone's turning the imagination factor up to 1,000,000%.
Until then, make sure you subscribe to the show wherever you listen, and why not drop a comment and give us those 5 stars?
This episode of the official Marvel podcast was hosted by Victoria Ying and me, Ray Lowe.
Our producers are Jasmine Estrada and Anita Flores. Additional writing by Julia Byers and Louis Gaudio. Additional editing by Ry Dorsey and Justin Harris.
Brad Barton is our Senior Manager of Audio Production and Development, and our Production Manager is Emily Godfrey.
Mixed by Zachary Goldberg.
Our theme music is by Ida Akbal.
Executive produced by Larissa Rosen.
Thanks for listening.